This webinar will provide an in-depth look at the Build America, Buy America Act, which we will refer to as BABA throughout, not to be confused with something a toddler might say. On this webinar, we will cover how a manufacturer demonstrates that their products are BABA compliant, what kind of market opportunity BABA presents for US manufacturers, what types of projects do and do not require BABA compliance, and what types of products are and are not covered under BABA, what tools are available for helping advertise products that are BABA compliant, and more. So if you want to learn about any or all of these topics, you are in exactly the right place. Next slide, please. We have some great speakers for you, including my colleague, Joe Kendrick, who is the lead author of Making BABA Work for American Manufacturers. Wendy Vittori, Executive Director, Health Product Declaration Collaborative, who is also a co-sponsor of this webinar. Paul Shariari, Founder and Chief Innovation Officer at Ecomedes, another co-sponsor. To reinforce what Abby said at the top, you note that Q&A at the bottom, right? You can submit questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen at any point. And then just to anticipate one of those questions, which we always get, the recording and the slides of this webinar will be available to all registrants. Next slide, please. A little bit of background on the Blue-Green Alliance, if you don't know us. BGA represents a partnership of labor unions and environmental organizations. This is our vision statement. The foundational principle that brings and keeps our partners together is a belief that we don't have to choose between good jobs and a clean environment, that we can and must have both. Next slide, please. The Blue-Green Alliance was founded almost 20 years ago, time flies, by the United Steelworkers Union and the Sierra Club. We now include a broad range of national/international labor unions and environmental organizations who collectively represent roughly 15 million members. Next slide. We are first and foremost a public policy organization. We work at the federal level and in a number of states at the intersection of climate, clean energy, manufacturing, health and safety, and jobs policies. Part of our DNA, a big part, is a conviction that unionized jobs in manufacturing are one of the essential ways for working class people and communities to secure a decent life in this country. We have championed policies to strengthen American manufacturing since our inception and did a bunch of work during the Biden administration to pass laws that have contributed to a revival in US manufacturing, which we'll talk more about. Next slide. One of those laws was the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, passed by Congress as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in 2021 and signed into law by President Biden, which included, importantly, for our context here, the Build America, Buy America Act. At BGA, we have always believed that when taxpayer dollars are used to purchase manufactured products, American-made products should be at the front of the line. But until BABA was passed, the vast majority of federally financed procurement, that is procurement not done directly by the federal government, but using federal dollars in the forms of loans and grants primarily, was not subject to Buy America requirements. BABA closed that gap, which covers hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding. Next slide, please. We believe that BABA is a critical tool, therefore, for aligning the goals of accelerating the deployment of clean technologies, with boosting US manufacturing and jobs for American workers, with reducing pollution. Many key bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act programs designed to manufacture and deploy clean technologies in this country are subject to BABA requirements. And to that point, and to be crystal clear about what we view as the stakes here, We believe that the combination of BABA and historic levels of public investment in the clean economy provides us with a really, really exciting opportunity to create markets for US manufacturers of clean technologies and sustainable building products so that they can scale and innovate and compete in some of the most important technologies and building product categories in the global economy of today and tomorrow and 2 decades from now as it decarbonizes and cleans itself up. Next slide, please. Let me actually say one more thing here, a little extemporaneously, because it's a bit of an elephant in our virtual room, right? There is a ton of uncertainty within the U.S. manufacturing sector and global supply chains right now in response to the Trump administration's tariff policies. We also see Congress, specifically the U.S. House, debating a budget reconciliation bill that includes dismantling most of the IRA's investments in federal agencies. We see federal employees leaving or being laid off, and we see the continued freezing in many cases, many programs of already obligated grant and loan funds. All of these are important topics. We will not be covering them on today's webinar. They are too complex and we don't have the time. But I want to acknowledge that important context up front. And if folks have any questions about that context and what's happening, feel free to ask in the Q&A. We will do our very best to answer those questions based on what we know. Next slide, please. I do want to share. Can you go back one slide, please? Sorry, Abby. Yeah. So I want to share some information about our Building Clean work. Our buildingclean.org website features, and many of you are familiar with this website, but to be explicit about it, it features search tools to identify efficient and healthier building products and find manufacturers who are making those products in the United States. Our manufacturer database includes over 4,100 manufacturing locations searchable by a bunch of different attributes like product sector, CSI, state, zip code, and more, which enables local and regional sourcing and supports good quality manufacturing jobs in communities across the country. We're now reviewing these companies to better understand which companies manufacture products that are BABA compliant and make that information searchable on Building Clean. Okay, next slide. This interactive chart of manufacturers making BABA and Buy American compliant products is actually a new addition to our search tools on buildingclean.org. So it currently includes 8 product sectors, 184 companies, and is growing rapidly as we continue our outreach to companies in our database to understand whether they're making compliant products or not. Because the Buy American Act has been around much longer than BABA, and because there's a fair amount of overlap between BABA and Buy American, we've included companies making both on this list. However, there are some critical differences, which you'll hear about in a minute. Next slide, please. We also have a product search tool on Building Clean that was created and is supported by our co-sponsor and partner Ecomedes. It's how we provide users of our website access to thousands of building products with certifications and transparency information related to sustainability, chemicals, and health. We and Ecomedes have brought together their product data with our manufacturer data to share both in an integrated way. And Paul is going to provide additional details about these tools during his part of the presentation. Last slide for me, Abby. Just to quickly summarize how BGA has worked on BABA with our partners and allies. We supported BABA as it made its way through Congress and into the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Since it was signed into law, BGA has heard from a variety of different stakeholders about their excitement about BABA, but also some of the challenges they've encountered in implementing and complying with it, including in some key programs designed to lower pollution. As BGA works to align our manufacturing and decarbonization and detoxification goals, we felt we had a role to play in ensuring that BABA implementation contributed to all three. So towards that end, BGA has engaged with stakeholders to formulate best practices for waivers, engaged with the federal government over waiver practices, work with key partners like Ecomedes and the Health Product Declaration Collaborative to provide tools that will facilitate U.S. manufacturers, officials, and contractors responsible for procurement in finding each other. And we have engaged with manufacturers like we are doing with this webinar. And on that note, I will turn it over to my colleague, Joe Kendrick. Joe?
Thank you, Jason. So I'm going to be giving a brief overview of what the BABA law and regulations say, and specifically what they mean for domestic manufacturers and how domestic manufacturers can take advantage of these new opportunities. Everything that I'm going to be saying on this webinar is covered in more detail in our recently released user guide, Making BABA Work for American Manufacturers. Next slide, please. So the first question you might have, and I apologize if you hear any background noise, my daughter is getting ready for bed at the moment. First question you might have is why you should care about BABA. Is this really creating market opportunities, or is it just a lot of extra paperwork? We think it's both, essentially. As Jason mentioned, this is a major expansion of the scope and scale of prior Buy America policy, both in terms of the type of projects that need to use American-made products and materials, and in terms of the actual products and materials that are covered by domestic content preferences. BABA was passed as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, and that law was then followed up shortly by the Inflation Reduction Act. And these two policies together allocated over $700 billion in spending that is covered by the BABA domestic content preferences. Some of that money is definitely at risk right now, both from funding freezes within the executive branch and the potential for repeal of sections of the IRA from the House of Representatives. But a lot of that money has already been committed and obligated, is already being spent, and we expect will continue to be spent over the next years, meaning that project developers will be looking for BABA compliant products and materials to do their work. But BABA doesn't just apply to these two laws. It applies to all federal infrastructure spending indefinitely to the tune of about $100 billion a year. Next slide, please. So what does the law say exactly? It's actually a relatively short law as these things go, although that doesn't mean it's simple. The key sentence is that none of the funds made available for federal financial assistance programs for infrastructure may be obligated for a project unless all of the iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials used in the project are produced in the United States. So in plain language, if you're building infrastructure with federal government money, you need to buy American stuff for that project. Of course, the law goes into more detail than that, and not just the text of the law, but it's how it's being implemented by both the Office of Management and Budget and the individual federal agencies who are responsible for spending federal dollars. And I'll get into more detail on that. Next slide, please. So the first question is, what types of projects are covered by BABA? So this applies, as Jason mentioned, to federal financial assistance, which means not the government spending its own money on itself, but the government giving money to another entity like a state, a local government, or a nonprofit organization like a university or a hospital to develop infrastructure. And it covers infrastructure spending, which is defined very broadly. So this is sort of things that you might conventionally think of as infrastructure, like transportation, maritime, airports, water systems. It applies to electricity generation, transmission, distribution, utilities, broadband. EV charging is explicitly called out in the law. All buildings, with the exception of private homes, are considered infrastructure for the purpose of BABA. And then beyond this specific list of examples, which is defined by the Office of Management and Budget, any project that is publicly owned, publicly operated, or serves a public function can be considered infrastructure for the purposes of BABA. So this is really very broad, and it means a lot of projects have to comply with this law. Next slide, please. Next question is what types of products are covered? So the law calls out 3 categories: iron and steel, construction materials, and manufactured products. And each of these has its own definition and its own set of requirements for how a product can comply with BABA. Next slide, please. So iron and steel includes both just solid chunks of metal like rebar or an I-beam, and also simple products that are manufactured predominantly from iron and steel, like a fire hydrant or a steel fire door. And for an iron or steel product to qualify as BABA compliant, all manufacturing products from the initial melting and pouring of that metal through the final assembly of the product must take place in the US. And if that means if you make iron and steel products, you do potentially have to look multiple steps backwards in the supply chain. So verify, for instance, that the company that made the steel is domestic, then the company that maybe finished or coated the steel is domestic, and then finally the site where the assembly took place is domestic. However, these types of products generally have pretty simple supply chains, so this is hopefully not too onerous for manufacturers. The only exception to this all metal has to be domestic rule is that the minor components of these projects, like hardware, rivets, and bolts, can generally be excluded. So if your company makes a steel frame for some sort of building project, and the steel for the frame itself is domestic, but the bolts holding it together are imported, or maybe you don't know where they come from, that will still likely comply with the law. Next slide, please. Construction materials is a broader category of different types of construction materials. This includes non-ferrous metals like aluminum, plastics, polymers, glass, lumber, engineered wood, composites, brick, fiber optic cable, coatings, and drywall. What is missing from this list is concrete, cement, and aggregates. These are explicitly excluded from BABA. And like with iron and steel, all of the manufacturing processes for any of these products have to take place in the United States. Next slide, please. Finally, there's manufactured products, and this is definitely the broadest and most complicated category covered by the law. So a manufactured product is basically anything that is made of multiple materials and combined into something new. So glass is considered a construction material for BABA. Wood or lumber is considered a construction material for BABA. But if you have a glass window with a wood frame, that's a manufactured product. Manufactured products are only covered if they are permanently affixed to the infrastructure project. So if you think about like a building, that can include things like the windows, the doors, maybe heavy permanent computer equipment like servers, the HVAC system, the plumbing of the building. But it doesn't apply to things like the furniture of the building, tables, desks, and chairs, the personal computer equipment for use of the workers in the building. It also doesn't apply to temporary parts of the construction like vehicles or scaffolding just used in the construction and then taken away. For a manufactured product to qualify for BABA, it must be manufactured in the US, final assembly has to take place here, and it has to be 55% domestic components and materials by cost. So if we go to the next slide, we can see what that means in more detail. Basically, you have to think about all of the components that go into the the product, whether that's something you're purchasing domestically, importing, or manufacturing in-house, estimate the cost of those, and then see if the total cost of domestic purchased and manufactured in-house components exceeds 55% of the total cost of components. And note that shipping and import duties apply to the cost of imported components. This can definitely get a little complicated, especially if the product is complex and has a lot of components. But one thing I can say to reassure you is that you do not have to go back more than one step in the supply chain when calculating this 55% threshold. So if you buy the motor for a product from an American manufacturer, the motor is made here. It doesn't matter where the materials of that motor or the wiring or subcomponents of that motor came from. Next slide, please. So if you make products that you believe or have determined to comply with BABA, how do you certify that this is the case? The whole law relies on self-certification. And all this requires is that you provide a simple letter or other form of documentation stating that the product complies. This should say that the product was assembled in the United States, the location of final assembly, the fact that it complies with BABA. If it's a manufactured product, it should indicate that it meets that 55% threshold. But you don't have to provide, at least specifically for BABA, super detailed information on your supply chains or cost breakdown of manufacturing. This documentation, however, needs to be unique to every project. So it's not enough to just post a sort of general purpose to whom it may concern letter that says our heat pump is BABA compliant. You have to, if someone wants to use your heat pump in a BABA covered project, they have to get in touch with you and say, hey, can you provide us with a letter that says this heat pump being used in this project complies with the law, and then you have to issue a letter to that individual project developer. So if you make BABA compliant products, you can proactively, and we think you should proactively start listing and advertising them as such, but you're going to have to be prepared to issue this documentation for self-certification on a project by project basis. Next slide, please. So I mentioned advertising. Here's just a quick example. A lot of companies are starting to do this now, but Baron Lighting Group has this nifty USA products page on its website where they list different domestic content labels that some of their products meet. And if you click on the BABA products button on the website, it takes you to a directory of all the products that meet the BABA requirements. And then you can view more information and buy those products. But again, it's not enough to just provide that label. The project developer is going to need this company or any company to provide a project-specific document. Next slide, please. A project-specific self-certification letter might look something like this. This is a template taken from FEMA, although all of the federal agencies that have put out templates, they basically look the same. It's pretty simple. It basically asserts that the product meets the law, lists the materials, lists the project, and indicates the location of final assembly, and then there's a signature requirement. I do want to acknowledge, though, from some conversations we've had with actual manufacturers, this is very simple in theory, and this is what is asked for in the BABA law and regulations itself. But in practice on the ground, this sometimes gets more complicated, especially as other requirements get combined with BABA. So we've definitely seen examples of developers asking for more complex documentation where they want BABA certification, but they also want certification for a bunch of other things, all sort of wrapped into one. So I can't promise you that the paperwork's always going to be as simple as this letter makes it look. Next slide, please. So I want to talk briefly about waivers. A waiver can be issued for BABA when a developer can't find a suitable domestic product, or when using domestic products raises the total project cost by more than 25%. And we expect that waivers are going to be requested and approved. That's not a problem to see waivers coming through. not every single product that's needed for every single type of infrastructure project is made in the US. Um, but we want to see these waivers being issued in a way where they are narrowly tailored, time limited, and can provide a market signal that there's demand for a domestic version of this product. So as a manufacturer, you can look at waivers. They get posted as they're requested and approved on agency websites with a central directory through a website called madeinaamerica.gov. Before they're approved, they're posted for public comment for at least 15 days. And during that public comment period, you can think of a waiver like an RFP. If you make a product that suits the needs of the developer who's requested the waiver, you can comment on that waiver and you can say, hey, we actually make this product domestically. It meets the BABA requirements, and you could buy it from us. Alternately, you can look at waivers that have already been approved and look for cases where maybe many waivers for a single type of product have been approved and use that to gauge interest in domestic version. If you're seeing lots of waivers for a certain type of product that is similar to something you make or maybe something you made in the past, you know that there's demand for a domestic BABA compliant version of that product. Next slide, please. The final thing that I want to address briefly is how BABA differs from prior policy, since I know some manufacturers might be familiar with prior policy that all has confusingly similar names. So the two major prior domestic content policies were very frustratingly called Buy America and Buy American. Buy America refers to not a single law or policy, but a series of laws and policies that are similar to BABA, but much narrower, generally covering very specific types of products and projects like iron and steel products for certain water infrastructure projects or rail cars and other transportation projects used in federally funded transit. Buy American, on the other hand, applies to the Buy American Act, which requires that direct federal procurement use domestically produced products. So remember that BABA is where the federal government is giving money to someone else to build infrastructure. Buy American is when the federal government is buying its own office supplies or its own buildings for its own employees to work in. Many of the Buy America policies were effectively superseded by BABA. So for instance, if you made a product that you have previously self-certified as compliant with the EPA's iron and steel requirements, that was a Buy America policy. That product will automatically comply with BABA. Buy American, on the other hand, while there's a lot of overlap between Buy American and BABA, Buy American has a key difference, which is that it allows for the use of foreign products from US trading partners, while BABA does not. So there's a lot of products on shelves or in hardware stores or advertised online that already say they're Buy American Act compliant. These products very well may be BABA compliant as well, but unfortunately that Buy American Act sticker is not generally good enough to demonstrate BABA compliance. So that's everything that I have for you today. I'm happy to take questions at the end, or you can look in our user guide for more detail. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Wendy Vittori of the HPD Collaborative.
Thank you so much, Joe, and it's a pleasure to be here with everybody today. So we're going to talk today about something that you might not have thought about because it's something that we are really newly considering, working with BGA and also Ecomedes, both of which have been partners with us at HPDC for quite a long time. If we can go to the next slide, please. I know today that we have a variety of people on the call, and some of you are perhaps familiar already with our work at the HPD Collaborative, and some of you may not be. So I just want to take a brief moment and give that background for those on the call who haven't encountered us so far. So HPD is short for Health Product Declaration, and I want you to imagine with me a time that seems like in the distant past almost now, back in 2012 and before that, there was a situation where architects and designers were becoming very interested in finding building products that had healthier chemicals in them. And by that, what we mean is ones that do not have hazards that are detrimental to human and environmental health. And so when they tried to do this work, they encountered a confusion of information. There was not a lot of information to begin with. And what information that there was confusion about what it said. And there wasn't a consistent standard that both identified which pieces of information were important to a decision like that and provided a means for manufacturers to provide that information. And so this is how the Health Product Declaration open standard came along. Open is on purpose. It's an open standard that's available to everyone. And we have, since that time, since 2012, we started up the HPD Collaborative to form that standard, which is a consensus stakeholder standard, to build a community of practice around that that could define what we now have come to call material health is, and to develop that methodology as well as tools that are available broadly in the building industry to support those decision makers. Now, it also supports manufacturers because we work with the manufacturers and provide tools for the manufacturers. And I'm going to be showing you that tool in just a moment, both of our tools, in fact, and helps manufacturers get on top of the data, work with their supply chain, and build that knowledge base, which also helps manufacturers understand how these chemicals work in their own products. Because if you think about it for a moment, let's assume you made a table. How much did you really need to know about the human and environmental health hazards of all of the chemical ingredients that went into the material used, the wood, laminate, the coating, the steel legs, and so on? Probably not much beyond what would influence the performance of that product in its intended use as a table. So what this has really done is open the minds of many people in the industry, and we're just delighted that over 1,000 manufacturers have voluntarily supported this initiative and have so far, since we started, published over 14,000 of these HPD reports. And these are publicly available, and I'll show you the database where they are available. So we have been partnering, if we can go to the next slide, with a variety of product libraries, and Ecomedes, our partner today on the call, is one of our primary partners where we make this up-to-date information available through, you may be familiar with the term, an API. It's a computer methodology for automated data exchange. And you can see here a snapshot from the Ecomedes product library, where you can see that over 40,000, in fact, building products, and this is SKUs, have HPD reports available for them. And just to calibrate that, I know it's small here, but if you can see with your eagle eyes for EPDs, which we hear an awful lot about and actually predate the arrival of HPDs, it's actually a bigger number. So going back to that time in 2012, when an architect designer thinking about how do I get products that have better chemicals for human and environmental health into my designs, we've come a long way. We still have a ways to go, that's for sure. But one of the really important things is partnering with groups like the Blue Green Alliance, which through the ByClean database that we saw a few minutes ago has made this data available also to everyone looking there. So if we can go to the next slide. What I want to talk about now is this builder tool that we have developed, which, as I said a moment ago, enables the manufacturers to enter this relatively complicated technical data. And that's an important tool that we have developed because this material health information is complicated. First of all, it's the chemistry. Second of all, it's the human and environmental health hazards, which brings in expertise such as toxicology and public health and occupational health and so on. So what we've done is create a tool that brings the appropriate databases into the tool that brings that expertise in the form of a guided data entry that manufacturers can use and does all the rule checking automatically so that you can put the data in and then the tool will tell you you're on the right track. You're entering this appropriate data. It tells you exactly precisely which pieces of information are needed. And then it enables you to report them at a very detailed level. And it automatically produces that report I showed on the first slide for you. So what we are doing now, and it's a relatively recent discussion, so we're just going to give you a kind of a sneak peek at where we're headed, working through this partnership with Blue Green Alliance, is to add a new, and it's totally optional feature. So if you're a manufacturer that's already doing HPDs, what this will do is add a new piece of data that will enable you to signal to people who are looking at those HPDs. And in our case, typically it's a designer and an architect that's selecting and specifying products for their projects. It will allow you to signal that you have evaluated BABA and that you have available a self-certification letter for them. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do that in just a moment. So again, I want to stress it's an optional feature. If it's not convenient to use it, you don't need to use it. But if participating with BABA is something that you want to do and you're thinking about HPDs, then this is something to consider. If you have products in the built environment, you haven't considered HPDs, we hope that this will alert you to that opportunity as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So within the HPD Builder, we have something called the Program Pre-Check feature. Now, what this does is it takes the plethora of different programs where people are looking at this type of information. So those can be a rating, a certification for those of you familiar with the built environment, sustainability ratings, things like Cradle to Cradle as an example. So I can come here and I can take a look at how the data about my products would align with the requirements in those different programs for that information to be compliant. So we call that alignment. It's a pre-check. It's not a final determination, but it helps manufacturers really get a grip on, with the many different programs that are out there, what are these programs, first of all? And second of all, how close am I with my product to meeting what those programs are looking for when it comes to material health? And so we're working now on implementation of something, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek of how we're going to use this feature. And we're going to look at how we can get that out into production in the second half of this year. So what it would look like there, it would be a BABA program pre-check. And so you'll go into that area. And again, if you're not familiar already with the HPD Builder, we have some webinars and so on, and I'll provide that link to those who attended so that you can look at how to get more information about these tools. So if we go to the next slide, please. In that program pre-check, we provide information about the program. So if you've never heard of that program, now obviously everyone on this webinar has heard about BABA, but we also want to bring this to the attention of people who are using this tool on a regular basis who may not already be aware, or who to contact, or how to contact them, or what are the requirements. So all of that information is consolidated in this one reference point in the HPD Builder. So if we can go to the next slide. So Joe already talked about the self-certification letter. What we will have available in the Builder will be some templates to give you those tools and make them readily available to you. And you'll have an opportunity to actually create sort of a sample letter with your information filled in if you want, and be able to upload that and say, here's an example for this type of use, because there are different ones for different uses. But relative to your typical product use, you could create a sample. And as Joe already said, the end requirement is a project-specific letter, but you're going to signal through having this that you're available to provide that to a project that is wanting to use a BABA product, in particular yours. So if we go to the next slide. So you'll have a chance to take that sample letter and upload it so that it will be attached to your HPD report. And so when that report, what we call, when a report is completed and the manufacturer is ready to make it public, you publish that. And so when you do that, if you have provided this sample letter, that will come along with it. And so what that will enable is someone looking at your HPD report to see what data you have available for BABA compliance. So if we go to the next slide, and you'll be able to update and edit that and, withdraw it and do the things that you need to do if things change. So it'll all be manageable by you and controllable by you. As I said, it's a completely optional feature that we're making available for those who want to do it. So this is a snapshot of the login page from the HPD public repository. And this is the other tool that we've developed at HPDC to help people. And this is primarily aimed at the project teams. It's available to anyone, it's public, but this is primarily aimed at project teams looking for products with HPDs. And in this case, HPDs and BABA compliance. They will be able to determine that you have both of those two things. And as Joe was talking about, oftentimes on projects, it's not just one requirement, it's multiple. And so this tool is used by project teams that really are looking seriously at material health, because they have a wide range of features available to filter and select HPDs. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you just a snapshot of our dashboard and how we're envisioning that this BABA self-certification signal will be available. So this is a dashboard that we have available that, as I said a moment ago, enables a lot of different filtering. You can see here, there's almost 10,000 HPDs for which we have the complete digital data set, and that enables all this different kinds of filtering and selection to happen by someone looking for a particular kind of product with a particular kind of material health signature. And so here, what we'll be adding to the various pre-checks, and you can see here others that you may be familiar with. I mentioned C2C already. LEED is one that's very heavily used. So here we would also offer the BABA pre-check. So a project team would be able to go in, say, I'm looking for whatever I'm looking for, and one of the things I'm looking for is that this BABA signal is present. And so they can click that, and then that will down select the HPDs that meet their other requirements and have this BABA signal associated. And what, again, that is would be a sample letter that you have uploaded and now is available alongside the other data from the HPD. At that point, there will be an automated feature that the user, the project team person, can click and say, I would like to request a project-specific letter. And then that will go via email. That request will go via email to the contact person that we have for that HPD. So we hope that this is going to provide, a means for manufacturers that are doing HPDs already to, if they wish, add this signal about BABA alignment, and also make it easy for project teams that are using HPDs to add this additional filter and say, and I'm looking for products that have the BABA signal. So appreciate your interest in this, and I think we'll have questions at the end. And now I'm going to turn it over to Paul Shariari.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate it. Really excited to join you guys today. What we're going to talk about a little bit is the evolution of the sustainability requirements in the marketplace, and how the BABA and the Made in America and all the other great content that we've shown, how it's kind of made its way into the overall market flow. On the next slide, what I'm just charted, I've done this for a couple trade associations over the past, is it's a windy road. Obviously, the evolution of this marketplace from the first days of LEED when it was a pilot, back when I started in my career in this industry in 98, all the way through where we're going now. It's a bit of a road that's going into the bottom of this mountain here. But what I'm going to cover with you a little bit is just the evolution of that marketplace and just share with you some of the data that's driven decision making. And I believe that the Made in America both is part of what I think the IRA was looking for, but I think it's a natural progression for what the marketplace wants in terms of, you know, manufacturing resiliency and having things a little bit more in control onshore, and certainly tariffs make that a little bit more important as we kind of look at the overall impacts of that. On the next slide is just a really quick snapshot. It's a bit of an eye chart, but it basically shows from the early, 1998 version 1 of LEED all the way through the release of LEED v5 that just happened a couple weeks ago. LEED is the most dominant rating system that we've had in the marketplace, but Living Building Challenge came online around 2026. And then overall, we had the WELL standard and then also Green Globes coming online. So all of these are the ways that we grade whether or not a building has the right engineering, architecture, and products within it to make it more sustainable. And at Ecomedes, we actually track how to support this data because a lot of this information is being tracked by hand, by spreadsheets. Back when I did, it was fax machines and highlighters, if you can imagine, and gigantic big 7 or 8 inch thick notebooks that were sent off to get hand graded at the US Green Building Council. But at Ecomedes, we kind of digitized that entire workflow starting in 2016. And what I'm going to share with you is actually the information from looking over the top of the overall usage case. So on the next slide, we have all the rating systems. So as we kind of have evolved in the rating system game, the LEED has become the most dominant one. But in there, we had the federal green building guidelines of the GPC and other things coming online. The GPC became a top 10 standard over the last 4 years. So the federal buyer and public sector buyers, I would say, are also very, very important in the marketplace because the private sector buyers do a lot of work. But a lot of times these kind of regulation or data-driven decision-making has to be done when you are doing work in the public sector, as opposed to sometimes some of these aspirational goals on the sustainability side are value engineered both in and out of projects depending on cost and schedule. On the next slide, what we did is we actually tracked all the attributes. We have over 3,000 attributes in our database, but the top 25 here, eco labels and certifications, are important to see. Carbon was a big driver through 2024, so obviously that was the big driver in terms of search and discovery. But the very bottom, the 25th entrant, was the Buy America Act compliant, which was a new filter that we had just launched midway through 2024. So it really kind of became very, very important very, very quickly. And again, I think some of the stuff that we are seeing is that that's not going to kind of go away just based on some of the inner politics that are going on. It also is important to think about just the overall lead times on products. A lot of the products that are made here can get to the job sites a lot faster. Some of the longer lead time things certainly have been put on pause. We have a lot of manufacturers that both have domestic and foreign manufacturing locations. A lot of things never left the port of departure to come into the US market. So client teams had to go and change specifications on the fly just to deal with the non-availability of products. We saw a little bit of this happen during COVID as well. So we share this data. If any of you are manufacturers, please let me know. I'll be happy to share this data with you over any time horizon on our main Eco Index page. On the next slide, one of the things that we've seen is both public sector and private sector green procurement frameworks have evolved to actually include some of this stuff, not only for the where is it made, but also the sanity of the supply chain and the actual people that are making the product. So some of the stuff that's manufactured here also comes with some other social benefits, as opposed to maybe something that might be built overseas with a more of an opaque supply chain, both in terms of the materials, but also the worker protections and things like that. So I think as this evolves, we're going to see probably all these agencies writing up some new information about that, putting out some new FARs, and then the state and regional governments are also still kind of using some of these metrics. So I think we just got to watch and kind of see as this evolves. But if you have the data available, put it into these data sets, whether it's with Building Clean, the HPDC, or Ecomedes, because I do think that buyers want to buy with more data-driven decision-making frameworks. And finally, I'll share with you just some things that we're seeing the owner and the operators and developers. On the next slide, we kind of see what are they dealing with. Obviously, construction and the real estate market is in a bit of a reset. What are we going to do with the offices that are not occupied? What are we going to do with some of these spaces? I think they're going to get reimagined. And if we reimagine those spaces, then we're going to have to kind of retrofit a commercial building to be a lot of different things. I think that's going to actually create design and construction needs. But both of those groups, the designers and the construction industry, are dealing with some robust project requirements. Contractors are dealing with trade and supply chain availability issues. Product selection still stays at the top of that decision-making matrix, but both of them on the bottom of those two charts, they're dealing with data-driven product and project decision-making frameworks, and also massive and rapid digitization of their workflows. More and more of our industry is asking for tools to make it easier to make these decisions, both in the design phase and in the construction phase. And while AI is promising a lot of things, we're still trying to see how much inertia is going to hold back some of that evolution. But I will say, as a software development team, we are definitely bullish on the fact that if you have the data, you should digitize it, because if not, it really kind of holds your company back, both on the buying side and on the selling side of these decisions. So the last slides what I'll share with you is how we digitize that data. The Building Clean Ecomedes platform has all this information for both the blend of the best products that perform well. They have a really good matrix that they've created for good, better, best, and also all this really rich data on, BABA compliant, made in America, and also supply chain issues around, is it a union shop or not? On our side, we have the same data, and we merge it with a lot of the other data, like the HPDC data and over 100 different eco-label standards and registries that we pull together and try to normalize as best we can. It's a 1.2 million row, basically digital spreadsheet in the cloud. We have all these different sources, and we're constantly refreshing this data on a monthly basis. It's a lot, but we want to make it available so the data-driven decision-making helps project teams and procurement teams make better decisions. On the next slide, I'll show you on the left-hand navigation of almost every one of our tools, Buy America Act Compliant, Made in America, plus those sustainability and performance elements are always available. So every time you hit a filter on the left-hand side, it's actually going to refresh the number of products that meet those compliance elements. So while not getting into the nitty-gritty of what it all means, a lot of users that we see in those positions of selection, they are just trying to look for something that meets those guidelines. So the easier we make it for them, the more it'll get done. I think, in my mind, it's always simplicity will scale, complexity will constrain. So I think we want to do everything we can to simplify it for the person in that procurement seat. And we're really proud to feature the data that we have with the Building Clean partnership. On the next slide, if you double click into one of those product pages, you have all that information highlighted for you. On the left-hand side, we've used some AI tools to actually integrate all the stuff that's on the left and turn it into really kind of decision-making actionable information on the left-hand side of that screen, kind of diving into that information and doing that analysis for someone, almost like an AI consultant in the middle. Some people call that agentic AI, kind of a baked-in consultant for procurement. And if you were to select a bunch of products and you're interested in them, on the next slide, it shows that our tools can summarize all of it. And here you see a nice, neat description of a bunch of manufacturers from a bunch of different product categories, all with the plant location. And then if they had the BABA compliant letter attestation, that could also be pulled in. And then apply both where it's made, but also additively put in, hey, these all align with a lot of the buying requirements for a LEED project, the GSA, Mindful Materials, and others. Because I think it's the blending of those two elements that is so important to making it easier for people to pick the right product. Kind of like a Whole Foods for a grocery store. You walk in, you're like, well, somebody's curated the greenest things for every aisle. I don't have to kind of go through and pick and look at eco labels or maybe nutritional labels. So lastly, I'll end with, we have lots of ways that you can enrich your data. We have a lot of the environmental data, but we want to work with folks on the next slide. It'll show Building Clean, Ecomedes, or HPDC can be used to augment that data and add your compliance, add whatever other first-party claims you want to make. We have some manufacturers that have loaded up all their manufacturing locations worldwide. So, every single product is identified at where it can be made. So a single product could be made in multiple places, and we can find the closest by putting in a zip code. And then there's also product performance attributes that are important. We hold monthly informational sessions to help you figure out the best way to onboard the data. If you ever want to have an outreach to us, paul@ecomedes.com is the best way to get a hold of me. Thank you guys, and I'll turn it back to...
It's me. I got it. Thank you,
All right.
Paul. And
Thanks.
thank you, Wendy and Joe. That was a bunch of good information. We talked at you real fast. As Abby said at the top, certainly on the BGN, we have the ability to go past the hour. But but we've got a bunch of questions here. Let me ask a question for Wendy specifically, because Wendy, I don't know if you can stay past the hour. Do manufacturers need to add the signal that they are BABA compliant to the HPD library, or will that happen via data shared from Ecomedes?
So that will happen once they enter the information in the manner that I showed in the HPD builder, and then they would publish that HPD. Our automated connection with Ecomedes will pull it into Ecomedes automatically. And I might just add there something, I didn't want to make it too complicated, but we do also have the availability of location that can be provided for both the end product as well as the different at the chemical or at the material level. You can also indicate locations there. So that, is another option, that if you want to add that location data right into your HPD, that also would get transmitted directly over to Ecomedes.
Thank you, Wendy. Another question that we couldn't answer. So there was a question about whether we'd be covering USDA's implementation of their new Buy American rule that caps imported food at 5% of school food contracts. We have not tracked that. I'm not assuming anyone else has, but let me pose the question to Paul and Wendy if you have any information on that particular rule.
We don't.
Okay.
We've done a little bit on like the organic consumables in office buildings on like coffee and things like that, but we've not really updated that. And there wasn't a big signal that was something we could actually manage, easily. So we have not done anything in the food segment, but it's interesting.
Got it. Thank you. A couple of very detailed, more than a couple, sorry, Joe. Very detailed questions on BABA that I'm going to pass to Joe. First question, how can we prove that minor iron and steel components, rivets, bolts, for example, are excluded? Is there a section in the Act that explicitly states this?
So this is complicated, and I'm sorry to say I'm not going to be able to give a very satisfying answer. But it's called the minor components waiver. It is not written into the law anywhere. It was the Office of Management Budget, in developing its BABA guidance, recommended a series of waivers that they thought every agency might want to consider passing. And then most agencies passed these in various forms. So most federal agencies that are obligating federal funds have put this waiver in, saying that if your your nuts and rivets that are 5% or less of the total cost of metals in your product don't have to be domestic, but they've all implemented it slightly differently, and they may have their own reporting requirements. I think generally this doesn't need a huge amount of documentation. If you know that this waiver exists for the agency that's funding the project that you're providing products to, then you can truthfully just issue that self-certification letter. But some agencies might have additional documentation that they require, or project developers may want some documentation of that as well.
Thanks, Joe. More covered products questions. Do wall finishes qualify, or are they not considered permanent enough?
Yes, wall finishes would qualify. They would constitute a construction material rather than a manufactured product. So the guidance on construction materials would have more details on exactly what the requirements for that would be. The only thing I would add to that, and this maybe knocks another question we got out, is that many agencies have also passed a de minimis waiver, which basically says that you can exempt BABA for up to 5% of the total cost of everything you're using in your project. So we don't know exactly how different projects will choose to apply that waiver, but I think many of them may say, we're not going to worry about BABA for the paint. We're going to pursue it for the iron and the steel and the lumber and the windows.
Thank you for mentioning the de minimis piece, which is actually another question which I will not turn to. Next question, though, more on covered products. Are appliances required to comply with BABA for a federally funded apartment building? Refrigerators, range hoods, dishwashers, through-wall AC units.
So this is also complicated. It's going to depend a bit on agencies. Different agencies have put out different guidance on this. Candidly, to my knowledge, the agencies have not put out very clear guidance on this gray area between what is building contents like a desk and what is permanently affixed like a plumbing system. So I think HUD had guidance that indicated that a freestanding appliance wouldn't be covered, so that might be a fridge. I've seen conflicting guidance from different agencies on whether something like a security camera would be covered, where that's bolted, but you could unscrew it and take it away. So it's really going to depend, I think, on the specific agency funding it and how they've made that determination, and then the project developer will request the documentation as appropriate from the manufacturer.
Great. I'm going to come back to you, Joe. But a question for Paul. What possible benefit does an AI tool have over a database?
Great.
An LLM can only add uncertainty that is not beneficial for accurate reporting and conflicts with sustainability goals for reducing energy use. An easy question for you to field, Paul.
Yeah, no. When I mean AI, what we do is we take a set of algorithms that we know are compliant with federal rules, LEED rules, whatever, and we take a manufacturer's actual data. We do not hallucinate. We don't allow for hallucination. What I meant is just we process the data based on our algorithms, and we give you those sustainability highlights. I do not think it's a very good idea to rely on AI. I have yet to see any actual data that I would use outbound. So when we test our systems, we just kind of make sure it's never hallucinating. But I will say a lot of manufacturers' websites are being scraped to try to figure out if your product catalog is green or not. And I have never seen those actually be beneficial. And obviously, to the question too, we're using lots of energy to do lots and lots of silly queries. So I'm very happy that we kind of analyze your data when you upload it to us, and then we match it to all the rating systems that are already in our system, and we try not to waste any extra kilowatt of energy based on
Yeah.
bad queries.
Thank you for that answer. Thank you for the questioner for noting the energy use of AI and data centers. All right, Joe, I'm coming back to you. Joe said, that would be you, Joe. Furniture is not part of BABA. I have several clients that require this for furniture. From what you were saying, the criteria would apply, however, BABA compliance would not be able to get or need it. Is that a correct statement?
So this is, again, potentially falls in this gray area. So OMB and basically every agency has clarified that movable furniture is not covered by BABA. That is the content of a building. It's not part of the building. So, a table or a desk or an office chair shouldn't need BABA compliance. I think it gets a little tricky when you think about furniture that's permanently or semi-permanently installed. So if you have, bookshelves that are drilled into the wall or something like that, that's again going to then depend on the specific agency and the program officer. So if if someone is asking you for this, you could ask them, hey, have you actually been told you need this, or are you just sort of trying to cover your bases? If they've been told by their program officer, that person is the foremost expert on what that program requires. But if they're just trying to cover their bases and they're trying to order a bunch of swivel chairs, those really shouldn't need BABA certification.
Notice that gray area and complexity are themes here. I'm going to give you a country of origin question, Joe. Is the country purchased from? Is it the country purchased from or the country of origin of each component?
It's the country of manufacturing. So if you're purchasing from just a middleman sort of importer, that doesn't help you. That's an imported product, even if the importer is based domestically. But if it's a domestic manufacturer that's doing some final assembly and work, even if all of their subcomponents are coming from abroad, that still qualifies as a domestic component.
All right. We're going to just keep testing the depth of your knowledge here, Joe. To confirm, if a component within a manufactured product is a piece of sheet metal that is cut and bent at a US based supplier, but that supplier sources the sheets of metal from China, this component's cost that can count towards the 55%?
So this is also complex and is going to be a bit of a gray area. I'll say if this fell under iron and steel products, like a steel fire door, or then definitely not. The actual metal needs to be domestically produced. If it's a manufactured product, which I suspect it is because they reference this 55% threshold, there are various guidelines on various federal rules about what constitutes like actual substantial manufacturing or final assembly of a product. To my knowledge, this has not been explicitly spelled out within the context of BABA. My impulse is to say that if they're cutting and bending substantially, if this is a complex process that requires some machinery and some labor to do, then yes, you're fine. If they just import a piece of sheet metal and trim off excess bit with a bolt cutter, probably not.
So another question on sheet metal. We purchase sheet metal and shape it into various sizes and shapes. In order to comply with BABA, do we need to verify that we purchase metal from producers in the United States?
So this sounds like the products that this person's company makes would be classified as iron and steel products, unless the sheet metal is not iron and steel. And for iron and steel products, the metal has to be of domestic origin. That means melted and poured by a U.S. Steel or iron maker. So that would need to be domestic metal, and you'd need to be able to provide documentation to that effect.
Another, maybe my last question on cover product. What would you consider the cost if you manufacture the component in your own facility? Is it the labor plus cost of raw materials? Do you include overhead?
So there is OMB guidance on this. As best I remember it, it's labor plus materials plus overhead is all fine. What you are not allowed to include is like a profit margin. You're not allowed to sell yourself the component as profit at a profit in order to inflate your domestic content. But the full actual cost that you bear is all included.
3 more questions. Where are those waivers posted online?
MadeAmerica.gov is a website with a central repository. They have most, but not all of the waivers posted directly on the site. And then they also link to the agency websites that contain every agency processed by that, every waiver process by that agency, and the ability to issue comment if it's still open for comment.
Another question. BABA will be mandatory for federal buildings? Question mark.
I think if I'm understanding this question correctly, if this is a federal building that the government is sort of building for its own use, this is most likely not federal financial assistance. So BABA only applies to the government gives someone else money. So like a state government building, definitely covered. Local government building, definitely covered. Federal government building, that is federal procurement. And so that would likely be covered by the Buy American Act instead of BABA, which has overlapping but somewhat distinct set of requirements. So I apologize again for the complexity and terrible naming conventions of all of these.
No apology needed. Yes, we can. All right. That goes through all of our very good questions. I want to thank our audience. I want to thank Wendy, Paul, and Joe for your expertise and your generosity in sharing that expertise with our audience. And I will wish you all a good day. Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.